Hey, Winooski, thanks for coming out. I'm so glad you're here. You could be anywhere on a summer night, and you're here because you care.
It's for you.
Oh, you're very kind. I believe it's for democracy. So, I don't want to take up too much time on opening remarks because the panel that we have here is incredible, and I want to make sure that they have an opportunity to share with you how they're thinking about this moment. But for those of you who've never met me, I'm Congresswoman Becca Balint. I live in Brattleboro. Thank you. I have 2 teenagers who attend public school down there. I was a teacher for many years. I taught middle school, which is perfect preparation for Congress. That's why they don't get me down. I've seen it all. And so I don't have to tell you all about the urgency of this moment. You know it, you feel it. I've heard it from the few conversations I had coming in. People feel anxious, feeling paralyzed, not sure where to put your energy. People also feeling like they're not seeing the kind of leadership that they want in this moment from some folks in my party. I understand that frustration. We haven't been in this moment before with an administration that is so clearly following the authoritarian playbook. And the framers of our Constitution never imagined that Congress would willingly give up its power to the executive. They never imagined that. That's why it's so scary. Because my colleagues are willing to give up the power of the purse and the power around declaring war and clawing back money that Congress has legally spent and passing executive orders that are clearly illegal. So we haven't been here before, but we have done hard things before, and we are going to do them again. I am an optimist, but I'm very practical. I am not naive. I know how bad it can get. And I was just telling this gentleman down here, my grandfather was killed in the Holocaust. I was taught at a very early age what it looks like when a democracy is failing, starting to fray at the edges. So I do not say it lightly that I feel like we are on the verge of sliding into an autocracy. Why do we all care about that? Because we care about each other in Vermont. That people are not just here tonight because of your own fears about yourself. You care about your kids, you care about your grandkids, you care about your neighbors. I was just talking to a woman who said, I'm concerned about the fact that my community members can't afford the prescription drugs. It's not just about self, and it's something that I really appreciate about serving all of you from the state of Vermont. We are very community-minded, and we understand that nobody is coming to do the work for us. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the ones who are going to swing the pendulum. And democracy is a concept. It's a plan. It's an idea. It's a bold idea, and it only works when we are fully engaged in the process, which is why it gives me so much joy to see all of you out here today. So really briefly, I just want to tell you, I am disgusted by what my Senate colleagues just did a few hours ago. Disgusted. I know that Bernie and Peter were fighting hard for you in the early hours of the morning last night, and I will tell you, and I'm going to say this at top, at 7 o'clock, unfortunately, I got to fly out that door because I got to get back to DC, and I have to be back in DC by 9 tomorrow morning. Fight, not giving up. So, the work that I do is several parts. One is the work that I do in committee. I serve on the budget committee, I serve on the judiciary committee. And I see the ugliness up close. And as we go on tonight, I'll talk to you a little bit about what I think is going on with my Republican colleagues right now. Because I have done a deep dive on psychology and behavioral science for the last 6 months, and I'm not joking. I want to understand what is going on, and there's several layers of that, but I'll just tease that for you right now. I know that people feel, and I've heard it from folks tonight, that you're not seeing what you want from Democrats right now. Now, I hear you, I share that concern, but I also want to tell you that you're not seeing all of the things that we are doing day in and day out. And I'll just give you one example. When this horrible bill was first passed out of the House, my colleagues, my Democratic colleagues, and 4 of them, were up straight with no sleep for 48 hours, going toe-to-toe in the Rules Committee to try to pull out the worst parts of the bill, trying to save us from the worst impulses of this administration. There was no press covering it. The only narrative has been day in and day out, Democrats in disarray. That is not what I see on the inside. That doesn't mean I think we're getting it right. We need to put out a positive, clear message about where we're going, and not just about where we're going. And I promise you, every time you see that headline of Democrats in disarray, I want you to question who is planting that story and for what reason, and what are the things that are happening that I have no idea about. I tell you that because I don't want you to panic. There are so many people working so very hard on your behalf. And with that, I'm excited you're here. I'm going to turn it over to my dear friend and former Supreme Court Justice, Marilyn Skoglund, who will always be a hero to me. She was the first Supreme Court Justice in the United States of America to read for the law and not go to law school.
Thank you so much. And I too am absolutely thrilled to see all of you here that you care about democracy. But as moderator, my job is I get to start out by asking simple questions like, what are we talking about? What is democracy? I would posit that long before humanoids figured out fire and invented the wheel, they had to learn to live together in a group so they didn't kill each other in their sleep. So as humans developed and formed societies, think about a tribe. There are different kinds of governmental structures that they used. They had to have a unifying belief system. They needed some ethics, and they needed some rules. As society evolved, so did the rules. And that brought about a government that was more formal and more systems driven. And one of these was the notion of democracy. Democracy, what is it? It's a system of government whereby the power is held by the people and exercised through participation, either directly or through elected representatives. It's often defined as rule by the people, and it comes from the Greek words demos, which means people, and kratos, which means rule or power. People have the power in the democracy. That term first developed in 5th century BCE in the Athens area. So we have direct democracy, where communities are small enough to gather together and make decisions by raising of a hand or something. What we have here is a representative democracy, where we have, through our elected process, we hired Congresswoman Balint to make decisions on our behalf, okay? So, and the key aspects of democracy, as opposed to aristocracy or monarchy or dictatorship, is that the power comes from the people, and what's critical is the protection of free and fair elections, protection of civil liberties, and the abilities of citizens to hold their leaders accountable. That is the So I agree totally with Becca Balint. I'm thrilled you're all here. It's we the people. That's the preamble to the Constitution. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, and ensure domestic tranquility, to provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity, ordained and established the Constitution of the United States of America. It's our Constitution, it's our government. We are joined here with fabulous panelists. Susan Clark, down there, award-winning radio commentator, former talk show host, author of a couple of books. One of them is All Those in Favor, which I really love. Eric Agnero, broadcast journalist and film-producer. Who works with many boards and advocate entities such as the Media Factory, Vermont Institute of Community and International Involvement. We have Rodney Smolla, First Amendment scholar, retired as of yesterday as president of the Vermont Law School and Graduate School. He's argued in front of the United States Supreme Court, and one of his books was turned into a TV movie. And if this audience is engaged and active and civil and polite, I will tell you what Hollywood star played in the movie.
And yes, are there. I like that.
And then we've got Sarah Copeland, Hanzas, Vermont Secretary of State. Member of the Vermont House of Representatives from Orange, so she's had experience with both the executive and the legislative branch of our government. And then we have, of course, our Congresswoman Becca Balint. The overview of what is democracy, but I'm going to start with the Secretary of State. Your office is in charge of our elections. What keeps you up at night? And what are the electoral safeguards that help you get back to sleep?
Wow, how much time do you have for this? There's plenty to talk about.
Go for it.
So I would say that what keeps me up at night, what I like to stay laser focused on, is sort of comes in two categories. One is just the functioning of elections, right? You don't just wake up on election day and open the door and people show up and you have an election, right? There's 365 days of the year that we are prepping and planning and training and making sure that voters understand how to participate. So making sure that we do that performance well and on the spot is something that keeps me up at night. But the other part that really concerns me is answering the question of why do people sometimes choose not to participate? And this is part of the reason why my office is focused on civic engagement and voter outreach. We created a new position. We're doing a lot of work out in the communities during election years, making sure people are registered and understand where to vote. We created Vermont's first universal voter guide. So when you got your ballot in 2024, there was some instructions to tell you where to find it online, because we had to do it on a shoestring. We didn't have a budget to print voter guides, but we intend going forward to make sure that every single household has a voter guide that talks about the candidates from the top of the ballot all the way to your local races. Because I've spent a lot of time over the years asking people, well, why aren't you voting? And sometimes the answer is, oh, I don't know any of those people. You know, it doesn't matter because I don't know any of those people. And so I like to engage with Vermonters about what democracy is. And democracy is your opportunity to tell those people who want your vote what problems you want them to solve, right? And it's part of the reason why Becca does these community outreach events, so that as an elected official, she can hear from people about what they want her to be working on. It's just that that's gotten lost on a lot of voters. And so what keeps me up at night is making sure that everyone feels that they can exercise their power in a democracy to tell their leaders what they want them to do.
It's reminding them it is we, the people, that are running this show. So I appreciate this. Ms. Clark, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Many of us are feeling overwhelmed by big systems of government right now, but democracy is not just about what happens in Washington, D.C. It's rooted in our communities here in Vermont. And if I'm correct, you currently serve as moderator at the town meeting in Middlesex?
Yes, town moderator.
So I imagine you got a close-up and personal view of local democratic democracy in action. So what are some of the aspects of the Vermont democratic practices that we can lean on right now and be assured by?
Okay.
And what keeps you up at night?
Well, Vermont does have some qualities that are special for all of our flaws. One of them is the question of scale, because we have to remember that 65% of Vermonters live in towns of under 2,500. Think about that. By census definitions, it makes us the most rural state in the United States. Not because we have these vast open spaces like Wyoming, but how we live together, how we live clustered in our hills and valleys. Even Burlington's well below 50,000. We're pipsqueak, right, by national standards. And it has a huge impact on how we do democracy, because you have to think about it. Cities and towns are where democracy is rooted. It's where we register to vote. It's where we cast our ballots. And the overwhelming majority of Vermont towns use direct deliberative democracy to decide our budgets face-to-face at our annual town meeting. So even if you live in a city like Winooski with no town meeting, you live in a state with a very strong, extraordinarily strong local democracy tradition. When you go outside of Vermont and explore how things are done there, we don't quite realize, I think, how good we have it. It's year after year, it's decade after decade, and it's literally century after century. Our self-governance, I think, has really changed our democratic DNA. It's formed Vermonters' expectations, right, about how we make decisions together. It's, you go to your city hall or your town hall, it's right there. The workings of the democratic machinery, it's revealed, right? The election officials are your neighbors, right? There's your town clerk checking you in. There's your board of civil authority. They're your neighbors. They're sitting on these hard metal chairs, just ready to help you participate. And of course, there's your conservation commissioner, your planning commissioner, your trails committee begging you to join them. Please be part of our town. So democracy in Vermont is not a they. It's a we. And that creates some key differences, I think, in the way we are. One thing that's, I think, really special when you are involved in a local issue, get this, there are such things as facts. Because we all know that the zone is flooded, right, with misinformation, social media. Amanda Rickish wrote the book High Conflict. She has this really useful term, conflict entrepreneurs. These are partisans, media outlets that they make it their business to sow distrust because they benefit from polarization. And it's really harder to be a conflict entrepreneur when you're face to face, sitting with somebody in a room. When you're buying a new town truck, you can go check what the mileage is on the old one, right? And believe me, I have been in a town meeting where people did that. Right? So, facts, right? It's weirdly refreshing. And, we can also, we know how to be an opponent without necessarily being an enemy. And you see this again and again at the local level. A person who hates big government, hates spending, but gets it that, we need to tax and we need to spend in order to drive on that local road. Or a person who questions authority, right? And yet experiences tears of gratitude for their volunteer fire squad coming in formation dealing with a terrifying chimney fire. Coming together at this community level, I think it brings alive what we have in common, and it defies that nationalized narrative. It defies that us and them narrative. And by the way, it affects, I think, who we elect. Having personally experienced leadership roles ourselves, Vermonters have a pretty good idea of what authentic leadership really looks like. And as a rule, Vermonters do not elect a lot of posers, right? We really like straight talkers, Becca.
I'm so glad.
So I think Vermont's human scale democracy is a really powerful difference.
Couldn't agree more. Oh, Professor Smolla, how's retirement going?
You keep saying that, I'm still a professor.
I know. Okay, terms like habeas corpus and due process are being thrown around a lot by commentators and officials lately. So what are they talking about? And how do constitutional principles safeguard our democracy?
So I couldn't help but notice, I think you brought your
I
constitution
did.
with you. Pretty
I
cool.
go everywhere with it.
So I've had the good fortune to be a constitutional law litigator for my entire professional life, and also a writer and a teacher. But I've been able to argue cases in state and federal courts all over the country, including the US Supreme Court. And Susan, speaking of facts, one of the cases I argued, I was the main lawyer for Dominion voting against Fox News. Where the difference between fact and fiction turned out to be pretty important. This panel is about democracy, but as Congresswoman Balint's opening remarks suggested, we're not really in a democracy, we're in a constitutional democracy. And as the Justice said, the idea of democracy is not an American invention. It dates back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome. They practiced democracy, maybe imperfectly, but they had democracies. The unique American contribution to human civilization actually isn't democracy. It's the idea of rights. The idea that we live in a constitutional democracy where an independent judiciary can enforce rights against the government. The Declaration of Independence, which we'll celebrate in a few days. What's the famous opening? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And we now treat those rights as embodied in our Constitution at the federal level and in the constitutions of all the states, including the Constitution of Vermont. So you mentioned, Your Honor, habeas corpus and due process, two enormously important rights, part of a panoply of enormously important rights. Many of them are actually written down. Your little pamphlet has them. They're right there. Freedom of speech, due process, habeas corpus, they're right there. But they're not all there. Some are implied. Courts have recognized them as central to our humanity. The right to privacy actually isn't in the Constitution, but it's been implied. Now, some of you appropriately might think that can't be legit. You can't just make stuff up. You can't just make up a right. But I'll try to convince you it's fine. The Constitution itself predicted this. The 9th Amendment says that the enumeration of certain rights in this Constitution shall not be construed to deny or disparage other rights retained by the people. And even as to the stuff that's in there, Pick your right, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Those words aren't self-defining. Somebody has to interpret them. Somebody has to enforce them. And in this country, for 2 centuries or more, we've depended on the integrity and the independence of judges to do that. Now,
I heard
you mentioned habeas corpus. You mentioned habeas corpus and due process. As I come to an end, let me talk about why those, along with many others, are so fundamental. Habeas corpus, by the way, if you want to amaze your friends in constitutional law trivia, is the only right written in Latin that attests to its ancient origins. Habeas, the Latin word for to hold, as if to hold in custody. And corpus, the Latin word for the body, for the human, for the person. And this is an enormously important emergency button. If you are apprehended by the government, someone picks you up off the street and sends you to a detention center in Louisiana, you have the right in this country to go into a court with a writ of habeas corpus, and the judge, an independent judge, literally says to the custodian, bring the body to me and show me why this detention is lawful. And then due process kicks in. Due process is so important, it's in the Constitution twice. It's in the 5th Amendment, it's in the 14th Amendment. Nor shall any person be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And what does that mean at its core? It means when you grab me, you are taking away my liberty. You are holding me in custody. But I have the right to say to the government, I contest the legality of this. I contest your facts in front of a neutral magistrate, a neutral judge. I'll end with this. None of this matters. The Constitution doesn't matter. Due process doesn't matter. Democracy doesn't matter. Freedom of speech doesn't matter. That's just words on paper. This is paper. The Constitution's a piece of parchment. It only matters. It only has life breathed into it if independent judges retain the power and the courage to enforce what is in there, and then if the government obeys the judicial order.
That speaks to why the only protest sign I've ever used is I heart the rule of law. Because I believe with all my heart that judges have taken an oath, and if they uphold the Constitution, things will work out. But meanwhile, Mr. Agnero.
Yes.
You work with many of the entities that seem to focus on education of the masses and the responsibilities of a democracy. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes.
And so could you speak to the role of journalism and media in promoting and upholding democracy and in educating the general public?
Thank you, Justice. I'm here posing as the heir of Sandy Baird. I don't know if you know Sandy Baird. And your profile, Justice, reminds me that Sandy also, learned, like she clerked and then became a lawyer. And for Sandy Baird and our community of public affairs defendants and lawyers, there's 2 pillars that she was holding as important for democracy. Education, not only to go to school to learn all these theories, but having those kind of events where when a journalist or media didn't address something, as you were saying, the fights that you guys are putting out there in DC at least we can talk to each other and do that. So democracy has journalism and press as a pillar, a very important pillar, so much so that today this pillar is falling apart, and we see it. How do we see it? We see it by the silos in which each of us is. Last time I was flying from Atlanta to Vermont, I was on a Delta plane and then was watching Fox News. My neighbor, a lady, was horrified. How could you watch Fox News? I said, as a journalist myself, because I work for Voice of America and for CNN, I have to go listen to everybody before I make up my mind. Unfortunately, even in Vermont, we failing that requirement because polarization has put us in silos. We don't listen to the other parts. And so how do we bring that? We need to reinforce the place of public media. Public media. I was coming here and listening to VPR, and VPR did a very good advertisement of this event. So we also have to empower locally organizations that are doing that job, and I would like to commend our friends from CCTV who are trying their best. And unfortunately, those local outlets are dying because today all the advertisement money is going to online. And then we also have another big problem is that the government is harassing journalists. I'm from the Ivory Coast. Over there, when I was training myself as a journalist, we were invited by the US Embassy to lecture us on freedom of speech, journalism, democracy. But not long that 3 days ago, a friend from Ivory Coast said, Eric, are you sure you guys are still a democracy over there? Or is there any, because today everybody goes online and starts an editorial. There's no more facts. Even Voice of America, when I told my friend here in Vermont that I used to work for Voice of, I work for the government, this might be a CIA, but I'll tell you, VOA respects the rules. When it's an editorial, VOA will tell you this is an editorial. And then we carry on to the facts with the newscast. CNN does not do that. I work for CNN. I work for a lot of media outlets that no longer do that because it's easy to have someone ranting all day, as a so-called expert. So how do we save that? We need to invest in local media. People think about citizen journalism, but I had a riff with Sandy because I think that journalism is something very serious. As a citizen, you can be part of the discussion, but there are rules, 3 to 4 sources sometimes, and give the microphone to someone even if you don't like it. That's right. See, so we'll during the discussion we'll go back to that. But I would like to if there's one thing that Congressman you can do is to push for policies that will guarantee that we have a public media strong enough to compete with because when you look at CNN and then you come to look at your local channels, those who are for aestheticism will run away. So we have to make it as sexy as the other ones, and then knowing that we have the best content because we care for democracy.
And finally, for comments from the panel, before we get to the questions from the audience, Congresswoman Balint, hard for me to say that.
I know, you can call me back.
I can't, no, not here. You have often said how important it is to communicate across the aisle, across our differences. Personally, I know you do a lot of strange things down in Washington to try to, like you sing with bands in nightclubs and things of that nature, or whatever. How are you personally working to bridge the divide in Congress?
Thank you for asking this question. I think about this all the time. And there are so many different ways that I am so committed to living my values around this point. And one is I am a member of several bipartisan caucuses, one being the Rural Healthcare Caucus. If you are in rural Vermont, and you're in rural Kentucky, and in your rural Michigan, the issues are the same. And we ought to be able to talk about that apart from partisan rhetoric. It's just one of several that I'm a part of. I play on the bipartisan women's softball team, which is on brand, I know. But I do, I get up early and I take the field with Democrats and Republicans, and the rules are, we cannot talk about policy. We cannot talk about what happened on the floor. We have to talk about the game and our families. Now, it's hard sometimes, because sometimes I show up for practice or a game, and I know my colleagues have voted against my rights the night before. It's hard. Working across the aisle is hard work, and it takes a real moral center to see the long game. I have also invited Republicans to have coffee with me without staff around, without cameras around. That's the thing about DC. Everybody's doing stuff with the cameras. The cameras are everywhere. So it's important when I say to a member, I just want to talk with you. There's no ask, there's no agenda. I want to talk to you because I want to understand you and your district. There are also parts of the work that are designed to get us to treat each other like enemies and not opponents. When I served in the Vermont state legislature, part of it is that we're cheap and we don't want a lot of extra places where people can hang out in the state house. So there's only one cloakroom. There's only one lounge. That's not true in Congress. Everything is divided by party. When I walk through the floor of the House, there are the doorways that most Republicans walk through and the doorways that the Democrats walk through. There are cloakrooms off the floor of the House. There is a Republican cloakroom and there is a Democratic cloakroom. And to your point, if you walk in the Republican cloakroom, they're watching either Fox or Newsmax. If you walk into the Democratic one, we usually have CNN, MSNBC, or C-SPAN on there. Okay, so it's in the architecture. So you have to work really hard to buck that. And I want to give you the name of somebody who I find incredible inspiration from, who does this work day in and day out of trying to talk across difference. And her name is Catherine Hayhoe. She's a climate scientist. A number of you are familiar with the name. She is an evangelical Christian climate scientist. She's got to talk across difference all of the time. And one of the things that she says is you cannot start a conversation by talking about policy when you know that you are already in opposition to each other. You have to start with what is a common shared love or value. I see that you have kids, I have kids. I see that you're down fishing, I like to fish too. It's an investment that you have to put in over time. There is no shortcut, and that's why it's so hard in this moment. There's no shortcut. So you have to continue to show up in uncomfortable conversations and be willing to engage even when what you want to do is completely shut down and leave. And it's hard. But that is the work that I'm trying to do day in, day out. The other thing that I have been very concerned about is that many of us are not speaking to be heard and listening to understand. We are so concerned about being right and righteous that we have forgotten that there is an incredible gift that you give to someone simply by paying attention. It's called paying attention because you're actually giving them something of yourself. And so I try to practice this in all that I do in Congress, which is never losing an opportunity to listen deeply and not assume that I know all of the things that is driving somebody. And it's hard. It's hard when I see my colleagues who are voting in ways that I know are going to hurt people. It's hard for me to still try to find a connection because I have to take the long game. I cannot write people off because they may be a partner for me on a bill that I'm trying to move that's going to help Vermonters. The other thing is, as a gay woman who I never thought that I would be in elected office. I didn't know anyone in elected office. Nobody in my family ever served in elected office. It seemed like a pipe dream. And so when you come from the experience of thinking you're never going to be having that opportunity, and you're striving and you're trying to make something of yourself, you can't write people off. My entire life has been about not writing people off, and I'm not about to start now. I just want to quickly comment on what a couple other people have said here. Sarah, your point about competence and reliability and instilling confidence in government and systems is critically important right now. And that is the way out of this mess for so many of us, is that when we see institutions holding and showing up in a way to make it more accessible for other people. I loved that you said, Susan, that you loved Amanda Ripley's book, High Conflict. My team is sick of hearing me talk about it. It is a book that changed the way that I viewed my work in government. I highly recommend it. And you're talking about asking more of our press corps, and for us to be engaged in asking for more. And I couldn't agree more. So I turn it back over. Thank you so much.
I agree. I mean, I agree with everything everybody has said here.
Right.
Does anyone want to comment on what another panelist has already both spoken to? Or shall I move on to the questions that have been submitted by the people? The people.
The people.
That's what the people. Okay, Amelia from White River Junction asked, and please, all the panelists can jump in here. What are the specific areas of the Constitution where you see the document as holding and working to protect our democracy? And where is the judiciary holding? Anyone? What's still working? Well, I'll add to it. What's in the Constitution that will assure us that the executive will pay attention to what the courts decide?
So I'll go first. I'm guardedly optimistic about our constitutional future, and I want to encourage you to be as well. But you got to understand, this is coming from a cockeyed optimist. I grew up in Chicago. I'm a diehard Chicago sports fan, in which our mantra is always next year. I think that you'll be surprised as time goes by over the next couple of years as to how successful many of the challenges to the flurry of executive orders issued by this administration will be. It's still early in the game, but there are something like 250 current federal lawsuits challenging those orders. And in roughly 190 of them, judges have issued some relief to those making the challenge. And I suspect contrary to what I'm guessing a lot of you are kind of figuring, I suspect you'll be surprised at the end of the day at the relatively good won-loss record of the challengers in the US Supreme Court. Very quickly, there are two basic ways to challenge an executive order by a president. One is to say, you don't have the authority even to do this. Congress has to do it. You can't just do it on your own. And there's a long-standing body of law that informs that. The conservative Supreme Court justices on this case are actually anti-presidential power when it comes to sweeping claims of the authority of the executive branch. They did it again and again to strike down many of the initiatives of President Biden, striking down some of his COVID initiatives, striking down student debt relief, striking down expansive views of our environmental laws. And so they're skeptical of presidents that claim inherent power not backed by Congress. I suspect you'll be surprised that how many of them stay true to that at the end of the day. And then secondly, and I'll end, the other way to challenge an executive order is to say, you may have the power to do this, but you're violating some other provision of the Constitution. You're violating the Equal Protection Clause by what you've done to transgender persons. You're violating freedom of speech by attacking people because they advocate diversity, equity, and inclusion. And again, I think you might be surprised, I could be wrong, but I think you might be surprised that this court, including both conservative justices and liberal justices, will take some of those claims seriously. So I think the president will win some of these cases. He's good at the delay game, and a lot of these early decisions that have been coming down have been procedural decisions. But I suspect before his term in office is over, you'll find the courts standing up for some of these things. Now, in some instances, it'll get erased by Congress anyway, because Congress will just defund this. But in a fair number, I think you'll be surprised. And I think I'm urging you to have a little hope that the system will work.
I agree.
What if it doesn't?
I agree. You've got to maintain some belief in the judicial system. Everybody wants an instant answer. Oh, he can't do that. He shouldn't be able to do that. The courts are saying procedurally he did it wrong, or there's no power in the Constitution for him to do it. And they're not going to be upholding a lot of these things, but it's not going to happen overnight, and people lose faith. I still have faith in the judicial system, because otherwise, what did I do with the rest of my whole life?
So, Rodney, though, to the second point.
Yeah.
Is there a secret, fail-safe lever we pull if this administration defies the direct court order?
And the answer is no. Then you truly have a constitutional crisis. So we've been lucky in this country that historically presidents have obeyed judicial orders even when they disagree. Dwight Eisenhower disagreed with Brown versus Board of Education, but he sent federal troops to Little Rock to integrate Little Rock Central High School. Richard Nixon obeyed the court order in the Watergate tapes, and he lost the presidency. Even the myth about Andrew Johnson saying to John Marshall he's made his order and let him enforce it is overrated. He didn't really even say it, and in fact, the order was obeyed. This is sort of the last point that I was trying to make. Paper is paper. Judicial orders are judicial orders. At the end of the day, we depend on trust and good faith, and we've been fortunate, for the most part, to have chief executives that have followed the rule of law. God help us if that ends.
Okay, Abby from Burlington asks, how can we convince the people of this country, particularly the young folks who are disillusioned with politics, that democracy is worth defending and that their participation is critical? How about Secretary of State?
I love that question. Thank you, Abby from Burlington. It's a great question because what we need to understand as citizens in a democracy is that the people who make the decisions are the people who showed up.
Yeah.
And in the absence of somebody showing up and saying otherwise, the people who are in power will continue to do what they think they should do, right? And so, is it easy? Is it as simple as scrolling on your phone and clicking a few posts that you like? No, it's hard. It's hard and it's messy, but at the end of the day, it's the people who show up who get to help make those decisions. And so what I really want my young people to know, I have 3 children who are all in their 20s right now, and they are among the disillusioned. They are among the frustrated, even though they've watched their mom sit in elected office for virtually their entire lives. And they're really frustrated. But at the end of the day, what I need them to understand is that until they stand up and tell their leaders otherwise, they're not going to get a new result. When we look at how difficult it can be, and in some states in this country, even just participating in voting is made harder by the rules that are in place. I always want to say to those young people, who does it disadvantage? And who's winning in that scenario? When we make it harder to vote, when we make you stand in a long line, when we outlaw voting by mail, or we make you jump through all of these hurdles to get an absentee ballot.
None of these things that we're doing in Vermont.
None of these things we do in
Just to be
Vermont.
clear.
These are things that happen in other states. But who does it advantage? It advantages the people who are already in power when it is harder for you to participate. And I don't know, I mean, when my kids were teenagers and they didn't like what was happening, they certainly let me know. And so I want to challenge young people, channel your middle school self, right? Defy authority. Get out there and tell people what you want them to do, because in a democracy, it's our job to tell our leaders what we want them to do, not the other way around.
Yes, wonderful answer. And I would add to that the question is about how do we portray democracy as worth defending. And the truth is that in order to work for a thing, in order to defend a thing, you have to love it. And there was a public administrator in California who complained that his voters thought that democracy was a vending machine. Right? You put your tax dollars in here and the services come out there, and if it doesn't work, you kick it, right? That's what we do. And nobody loves a machine. I do not think that's how Vermonters think about our democracy. We know that our democracy, our local democracy, certainly, I think in democracy in general, we know it's not a machine. It is probably a better metaphor would be something like a garden. You have to keep coming back to it. We know that it's going to take tending. It can be annoying. There's always going to be some bugs, right? But if you put the work in, it will feed you. And that, I think, is how we need to be thinking about our democracy and working on our democracy. It's an organic, living thing. We need to feed it and understand it. Environmental educators know this. If you look around and go to an environmental education camp or anything like that, you got kids up to their elbows in dirt, right? They are building forts. They're pretending to be animals. Environmental educators, because they are rigorous researchers about human nature, know that in order to love a thing, you need to experience it. You need to get your hands dirty. So democratic structures, I think, are least effective when they leave us open to, exploitation by conflict entrepreneurs, and they divide us into camps. Things like public hearings, nobody's gonna love those. They're notoriously ineffective. They cause more distrust. They make us feel powerless. But democracy is super effective when we get a chance to do stuff. right? When we have democratic structures that build on what is best about humans, like participatory budgeting, it gives people power to really do things. Citizens' assemblies, we know what happens when people actually, when we serve on juries, it changes our brains. It makes us more engaged, more curious, more interested in the news, more willing to trust outcomes. So local committees, make them purposeful, emphasize their emphasis on community and make them social. I think these are the ways that we convince people that democracy is worth it.
Eric, how about you? Can you speak to?
Yes, I think that if the youth are disillusioned, it's because the adults are making them as such, you know, they're not delivering democracy. So how do you want the kids to follow them? That's the real problem. And also that we don't meet them where they are at. We don't meet them today. I mean, I'm sorry, we all are, but they more than us, like on their apps and things. Should we meet them over there to talk to them? Or should we make sure that a silly TikTok video cannot make someone become a president? I mean, it's a little difficult, it's a philosophical question. There's also, let's face it, our devotion for money. Anything in this country that cannot be stopped because people will say, oh no, it has to make money. It has to be, like, how can you be, how can you be against something when your own money is paying for this algorithm in your 401k or whatever? We also have to figure out what is our rapport with capitalism. Today, talking about democracy in the ultra-capitalist country, it's almost an oxymoron. You ask yourself, could you be a democracy when you have to wait 20 years after a Camp Lejeune so that people can make a little bit of money, even in litigation, and then they have to make all the money? Could you wait 10 years when, the opioid people are still, so we have also to look at it. Money is what fuels the whole system, the arts, everything. So we have to be clear about how we do that. We have to be a good example for the youth. We have to engage them. We have to meet where they are, but also at school, as you said. When we were kids, we like to do mock elections and learn how it is. We like to go to see Becca in DC and talk to her. You have to engage with those youth, not expect them to follow you when they have so much fun looking at a dance, a weird dance on the internet that makes someone become a president.
Topic on money for a minute. Emily from Bennington wanted to know, could you talk about the involvement and repercussions of money in politics? Specifically, she refers to the decision of the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States of America, in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, that pretty much blew up campaign financing laws. And the court found that laws restricting political spending of corporations and unions are inconsistent with the free speech clause of the First Amendment. It was a 5-4 ruling, so it was close. One major criticism of the decision is that it granted disproportionate political party power to large corporations. Now, in a dissenting opinion, Justice John Paul Stevens argued the court's ruling represented, quote, a rejection of the common sense of the American people who have recognized a need to prevent corporations from undermining self-government. Again, can the panelists talk about the involvement and repercussions of money in politics?
Let's frame it up. Look, every single member of Congress right now has to raise money to get their message up. And it is, I think I can speak for most members of Congress, it's the least favorite part of our job. We need publicly financed elections, period. The amount of time and energy that is spent raising that money and the sheer volume of money that we spend is obscene. And Citizens United decision was a disaster. Many of us in Congress have been working to try to figure out how we overturn that decision, but there are no easy answers in the short term. And so one of the things that we've been talking about within the Democratic caucus is, and I don't have any hope it will move in this Congress, but we're going to try, is to at least put some banning on congressional stock trading. I mean, what are we doing? Right? I have a bill in that is trying to protect small dollar donations. Like, there are things that we can do to try to reinstill some faith in the system, but the system of money in politics right now is not healthy. And you want to know that we are showing up for you and not for any corporate donors, which is why I don't take any corporate cash. But so, please jump in.
Well, I'll just reinforce both what the questioner said and the representative said. And it seems to me if you need proof of the unhealthy influence of money in politics, you can find it in two words: Elon Musk.
In Musk, we trust.
Those are actually, I guess they're words, okay.
If you don't mind, I would like to bring an international perspective to that.
Sure.
I mean, it's one of the only countries, I don't know if there's another one, that, where money can flow with no restriction in politics. My friends in Ivory Coast are asking me, lobbying and all this money, is it corruption or is it like a nice corruption? Like in other countries, everything is capped. Come on. I mean, billions of dollars just to get elected. It means that maybe we don't even listening to what is at stake. It's just like, he has like the best advertisement. And so I don't know if it's possible. And that's a question to those who know the law better than me. Is it somewhere in the Constitution that we can cap all this, we can regulate money in politics?
Well, I suggest after Citizens United, it's going to be pretty hard to regulate it. They took that away kind of from the people, yes. Moving on, Trent from Essex Junction asks, over the years, Vermont has secured some important safeguards to protect our rights. Same-sex marriage, shield laws protecting medical providers of abortion, for example. Will those protections hold against changes at the federal level? And what is the interaction between the Vermont Constitution and the United States Constitution? Professor, let's start with you.
Well, the happy answer here is states are free to do what they want. And so despite the Dobbs decision, for example, removing abortion from the United States Constitution, many states, including Vermont, have secured it. And that's the genius of our federal system. So the answer is yes. The states can, if they have the will, protect rights that may have been lost at the federal level.
Anyone else on that question?
Sarah.
I just want to acknowledge where that question is coming from, because I sit in a body where my rights are different depending on what state I'm in. And it is a really unsettling time to, even if you're living in Vermont, and in Vermont, we've done a lot of work. Congresswoman Balint and I were in the legislature together during the first Trump administration, and we got to work almost immediately creating the backstop that Vermonters would need if that president was able to do the things that he had said on the campaign trail. And it's part of the reason why we enshrined reproductive liberty in our Constitution. It's why the legislature has continued to work on shield laws. But it is a really unsettling place to be in 2025 when your ability to exist as a free human being is different when you cross over a state line. And I want to acknowledge how unsettling that is, and how wrong it is.
Okay, Joe from Winooski asks a very difficult question. I find it difficult. Could the Electoral College be reformed to reflect the will of the people and create a better representative democracy? I think, first of all, someone on this panel has to tell us how the Electoral College works and why it's not just who gets the most votes.
The professor.
Well, the framers of the Constitution were deeply flawed. They embraced slavery. The Electoral College is not the moral abomination of slavery, but it sure is a bonehead system. And they were elitists, and they were anti-democratic, and it's an anti-democratic institution, so it should be abolished. The problem is, how do you go about that? Well, you could have a constitutional amendment that would require an act of Congress and the ratification of 38 states. Good luck with that project. But I will tell you an ingenious potential workaround that has been in the works for a while. It's a clever idea. It's an interstate compact in which a group of states get together and say, here's what we'll promise to do. We will give all of our electoral votes to whoever wins the national vote. And if enough states signed on to the compact to get you over the 270, then in theory, we would effectively abolish the Electoral College because whoever won the national popular vote would get 270 votes. Now, I think they're up to 209 Electoral College votes. I think 17 states have adopted the compact. Whether the Supreme Court would uphold it or not, not entirely clear, but you can make a very good argument it would be legit because the states themselves get to decide how to pick their electors, and they would just be saying, well, we're going to do it this way. And you got enough of them, you'd have this clever kind of local defeat of this really dumb national constitutional system.
So I am very proud to say that, of course, Vermont has joined National Popular Vote. And, keeping tabs on the activity of the organizers of National Popular Vote, it's really heartening to see. They're traveling all over the country, talking with legislators to try to get more and more states to sign on. And so if you want to follow their work, just call up your favorite search engine. It's called National Popular Vote. And you can follow their work. You can even reach out to friends who live in states where they're trying to bring in the next set of delegates. So, I appreciate the candor that you used in describing the Electoral College because it really is pretty nonsensical. And I think most Americans, if they understand it at all, are confused about why we do it that way.
And one other quick point. If you're not in a swing state, it's demoralizing. It saps the democratic spirit because why the heck should I vote? Because it ain't gonna matter. It only matters what Wisconsin does or Arizona does, and that's not healthy.
Right.
I was told there's no 5-second delay rule here, which is why was directed primarily to me, so that no one was going to edit me. But I too appreciate your candor. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I would like also to add that it doesn't stop with only the popular vote. So we can also experiment other ways of doing that. That there's the one that it takes. If someone comes with a maximum, it can get, but there are also second legs, like where if you don't have the majority, then you have to go to a second turn, and then that second turn will be a place for alliances and for right choice to make later on. So there's a lot. My first election as a journalist were the Chads, about the Chads in Florida. And a few weeks later, a few months later, I went to Chad, the real country, to do a totally different election where, I'm sorry, the US has some good standards, but we have to do some work. So I remember exactly these Chads.
Congresswoman, you want to jump in on this one?
No, I don't, because people have said exactly what I was going to say. So let's move on.
Okay, here's Randy from Underhill. For decades, Americans have considered the United States to be a beacon on the hill because of our democratic principles. What does our constitutional crisis mean around the globe, assuming there's a constitutional crisis, and are there other countries that have emerged from a similar crisis, stronger and more committed to democracy? Anyone?
Well, I'll start with the first one.
Okay.
We have lost so much credibility in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
Relationships that we have built up over 80 years around the globe are being destroyed in a matter of months. And it isn't just diplomacy. If you look at what happened during World War II in terms of research and science, everybody was coming from Europe to do their research here. And right now, our researchers and scientists are leaving because their funding has been cut and they want to go to a country where they can do their work. That is shocking. And so it's related. It's not just about our standing in the world as it relates to democracy and diplomacy. We are shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of shedding these researchers and scientists who are here because they want to do their best work here.
But does the world at large think we've lost all credibility because of the ups and downs from the administration in Washington?
Yes. Listen, this year in my country of origin, the Ivory Coast, a lackey of Washington and Paris will be running for a fourth illegal term. There's only 2 terms by the Constitution. So every other year, they change the Constitution, and according to the interpretation of the change of the Constitution, he put everything to 0, and then he can go run again. Today, all the tyrants, all the dictators around the world, especially in countries in Africa that have, I've looked at the US as the flag bearer, the light, the torch of democracy, even though it's a constitutional democracy, they perplex. What's going on? Then how can you come and tell us to do something if in the country that we revered as, the beacon of democracy? I grew up with the portrait of Kennedy in my country. My father was so in love with what Kennedy was representing at that time on behalf of America that he started wearing only shoes from New England. Florsheim shoes. I had all the records of American, but because now, and I remember when I said that recently, we have Donald Trump. He said, listen, kid, all periods have the Nixon. When Nixon was there, they thought it was like the end of the world. So we need to, it's dangerous what is going on. A lot of freedom fighters are being jailed because what is Washington going to do?
That's right.
So we need to, whatever is happening here is definitely having, and then people are not happy about it.
The other thing that I think is a very dangerous situation right now as well is because we have cut all of the USAID programs. Tyrants around the world are moving into those regions and offering the food and the services and the vaccines and the health care that we used to provide. And so diplomatically, it's a disaster. For what? For what?
It's time to begin to wrap up.
No.
No.
Don't say it's time.
I'm sorry, yes. So, I want to ask each panelist, just for a brief, 2 minutes each, if you could choose one thing to recommend to these folks here, what they could do to fight for and strengthen our democracy, what would it be? Secretary of State Copeland, Hanzas.
All right, on the spot. So when people don't understand how the levers of power work, it's easier to control them. And back to what our dear Congresswoman said earlier about talking across differences. When we stand divided against each other and don't try to find that common ground of the things that make us neighbors, human beings, Vermonters, Americans, when we are divided, we are also easier to control. And so I think what I would want to challenge you all to do is to lean into helping your neighbors understand how those levers of power work. Lean into serving on a public board or committee in your own town where you will come in contact with people who think differently than you do. And lean into talking across those differences, because we exercise this much more naturally in Vermont, as Susan said, than in many parts of the country. But this is the only skill that is going to bring us together and bring us forward, is the ability to sit down with someone who thinks differently and find that one nugget of common ground that you have. And it's hard and it's challenging. And as Becca said, when you are trying to talk with someone who has just voted to take your rights away, it is the hardest conversation in the world. But I think that's where we need to go in saving this democracy.
Professor?
Well, I simply urge you not to give in to despair. Right. It's so inspiring to see so many of you here, to hear your passion, to hear that you care, and keep the long sense of history. This country's been through a lot, but it has endured. My parents lived through the Depression. My dad fought in World War II and in the Korean War. Many of us in this room remember the Civil Rights Movement in Vietnam, 9/11. The country will endure, and it endures if you keep faith, you continue to participate, you continue to elect fine people like our representative. We will prosper, we will endure.
Okay, well, one thing. This is going to sound soft, but it's actually really, really hard. What I would urge us all to do is go home and practice active listening. listening to understand. It doesn't just mean being quiet while someone else talks. Listening, I think it truly is one of the most powerful and frankly, perhaps the most subversive action that you can take in a democracy. And I do recognize that this is a much bigger ask of marginalized populations. I would certainly not recommend that we all start by listening to our enemies. You can start by listening to your children when they're whining. You can start by listening to your friends when they're being especially annoying, because the trick to active listening, it really is an art. The trick is to resist the urge to fix or to inform or to correct. It's not even an effort to find agreement. It's just trying to reflect back what you hear. And the thing is that once a person genuinely feels heard, then they, first of all, they stop repeating themselves, which is wonderful. And then when you actually reflect back what you heard, and they often will hear themselves and say, oh, well, actually, let me rephrase myself, let me amend. And after a few iterations, you can actually start to get to the real truth, the real concerns beneath what might be like positions. And so you can ask questions like, what happened to you that made you feel this way? What happened that got you to this point of view? Or you can ask, especially if it's political, you can ask, rather than hearing about the position, how does this affect you personally? And if you're feeling really brave, you can say, here's what I heard. Is that what you meant? We're constantly hearing that the reason that the other side won is because people felt understood. Well, what if we became really good at understanding? How subversive would that be? It's an art form. Take baby steps. It might save democracy.
All right. I took some notes so that I can be efficient. So we need to defend the First Amendment. It's important. First Amendment, defend it. Now, what does it mean? Economic pressure. 2/3 of the US counties have lost local newspaper since 2005, when the watchdogs disappear. Corruption is number one. Digital disinformation, we need to work on that. I don't know what, Becca, you guys are going to do in Washington, but we need to look seriously into that. It's the first time, 250 years ago, maybe you can inherit a tyrant. Now you vote for it, just because you get fooled by spin doctors. Hey, don't think that what happened is just because one guy was most popular. Spin doctors work like every day on the apps. Even in Ivory Coast, where I want to visit, everybody loved our guy. The pastors here, to whom most of the new Americans go, because we don't see them. We don't bring them to the discussion. We don't bring democracy to them. Education for democracy. They rely on the pastor. And the pastor told me, this guy is a good guy. He's sent by God because he's against all this war, blah, blah, blah. And then the same pastor comes to our office recently. He has 5 people that are going to be deported. But maybe they didn't know better. So we need to educate people. We need also to make sure that in colleges, debates come back. You have to be able to debate with your opponent so that you can know exactly, how to react in the real life. Education, and lawmakers, please pass the federal shield law and tax credits for local news organizations. For God's sake! Merci beaucoup.
I'm going to turn it over to Becca here to close us out. But all I want to say is that little thing I said to you earlier, we the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, that is the preamble to our Constitution. Go pick up one of these things. This is your Constitution, and you created it. You did the building blocks and created the template for the whole structure of democracy. Becca.
Well, I want to start by thanking our panel tonight, Marilyn, Sarah, Rodney, Eric, Susan. Thank you. And I want to also thank my team. If you are on the Becca Balint team, if you could raise your hand. They had this idea and they pulled it together, so I'm so grateful to them. So look, I know that it feels so overwhelming. You don't know what to focus on, right? It's flooding the zone. It's a strategy, it's a tactic, so that we do feel overwhelmed and disconnected, so we give up. So here's my ask of all of you. You gotta pick the one thing. Is it reproductive rights? Is it protecting veterans' health care? Is it protecting the vote? Are you fired up by what you heard about doing the end run around the Electoral College through the national popular vote? Is that turning you on? What is it? What is the one thing? Become an expert at that. Not an armchair expert watching what's on your phone or the pundits. I mean, really get curious. Become knowledgeable in your family and your community on this, and then figure out locally how you can get involved in this thing. Because if you feel paralyzed at the local level, there is no way you're gonna have the energy to fight for this democracy. And that's what we all need to do. We need the energy to fight for this country that we love. So pick the one thing. Don't be overwhelmed by the sheer volume of things. I'm in Congress, I have a full staff, and even I get to the end of the day, and there are news stories that I missed, and there were bills that were passed in the Senate that I didn't follow. So you have to make sure you're using your energy the best way that you can to be effective. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be out here tonight. It shows me that you care deeply about, not just about democracy, you care about the community that you all come from. You care about each other. We are hardwired for connection. Every single one of us. It is an animating force for us. And when we feel a sense of disconnection, we retreat. And so I'm going to ask everybody who has felt checked out and paralyzed to check back in. And I want you to ask yourself this question, and it's a question I ask people when they come to see me in my office in DC, if I'm meeting someone for the first time. Tell me the last time you were brave. Now, I'm not talking about running in a building burning building to rescue a puppy or a kitten. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, when was the last time you spoke up in a meeting when you knew something needed to be said, but you decided not to say it? When was the last time you stuck up for somebody who was being picked on and you knew it was gonna be uncomfortable to do it, but you did it anyway? We have to cultivate more courage and bravery in ourselves and not just expect it from each other. So as I said, I unfortunately have to slip out right when we end, because normally I would stick around for a long time and just give people an opportunity to talk to me directly. But my staff are staying behind. If you have a question or if you have an issue that you're trying to get solved, whether it's with Social Security or whether it is with veterans benefits, my staff is here. Please use them. And I'm sure some of the panel members are going to stick around as well, and they want to be a resource to you. So, you're going to stay connected. You're going to figure out how you individually can be more brave and courageous. You're not going to lose hope. And I can tell you, I see the ugliness every day, and I have not lost hope. I have not lost hope. We will prevail. We will prevail because we have all of the energy that we need to prevail. We have all the talent that we need to prevail. We have our values and our guiding stars within us in our community. We will prevail. Woo! I believe this in my soul, and you are all reinforcing that for me tonight by being here. Thank you. And I have one more thing to say, because we teased for some of you in an email that we're gonna have an announcement tonight. And I realized a lot of people thought it was gonna be like this incredible announcement, like I'm running for president. I'm not. But it is exciting.
I love her.
I am an avid reader, even with all of the work that I need to do in Congress. I have a stack of books by my bed in DC. I have a stack of books by my bed in Vermont. I am constantly trying to find the way forward for myself and for each of us. And so I am going to be launching Becca's Book Club. And I hope you'll be reading with me this summer. The first book is going to be Heather Cox Richardson's Democracy Awakening. And many of you are already familiar with her work through Letters from America. She has a podcast you can follow. Many of us in Congress follow her closely because she doesn't just talk about the moment that we're in, she talks about where we've come from that will help us figure out where we're going. So that's gonna be the first one. We'll be sending out more details about, we wanna do a public event about it, but we also want to engage libraries across the country. Well, yeah, across the country, why not? Across Vermont, to read the book with me. And, you know, I really want to, really want us to understand that no one's coming to save us. We're in it. And that's amazing, because we have everything that we need to get through this moment, but we have to do it together. So thank you so much for coming.